Saludos amigos, los invitamos a escuchar la Mesa Redonda, The Round Table, donde discutimos los temas del día, hablando de política, educación y otros temas, locales, regionales y mundiales, por USA la Radio. Hola Miria, están escuchando la Mesa Redonda, The Round Table, desde la ciudad del amor fraternal, from the city of brotherly love. Les habla Fernando Mendez. Estamos con Raquel Acosta, controlando el tablero. Y vamos a esperar si se nos une un colega más tarde. No sabemos si llega a ciencia cierta, pero hay mucho que comentar hoy. Estamos ocupados con las noticias, sobre todo con lo que está pasando en Washington. Hemos oído al presidente Trump anunciar unos de los puestos de su gabinete ministerial. Y todo el mundo está esperando a quién va a poner de fiscal general, Attorney General. Hay varios nombres que están pasando por ahí, pero no sabemos. Nadie sabe a ciencia cierta y, por supuesto, como se demoró este asunto de la transición, nos falta información sobre el grupo de gentes que va a estar alrededor del presidente. Los comentarios que se oyen en los medios, por supuesto, es que todo el mundo está contento de ver el profesionalismo, la experiencia, la seriedad de algunos de los miembros que han sido nombrados o que están esperando oficialmente que se les llame a servir al gobierno. Una gran diferencia en tono y en actividad entre el gobierno saliente y el gobierno que entra de Joe Biden. Bueno, vamos como de costumbre, a dar una información más fresca sobre lo que está pasando por el mundo en cuanto a COVID-19. Es triste ver lo que está pasando por el mundo, pero aquí estamos. También es hora, pues que mañana es el Día de Acción de Gracias. Es hora de agradecerle a nuestros oyentes por escuchar este programa. Les deseamos un feliz Día de Acción de Gracias. Hemos continuado con nuestros programas, de muchos de nosotros, de nuestras respectivas casas, en vista de COVID, pero aquí estamos, hemos sobrevivido y agradecemos mucho el apoyo que nos han dado. Así que de todo corazón aquí en USA la Media, les deseamos un feliz Día de Acción de Gracias. Time to say thank you to you, our listeners. Happy and safe Thanksgiving Day. We continue to put on our shows from our respective homes, making an effort in spite of COVID. And so here we are, and we wish you the best from everybody here at USA Radio, USA Media. Happy Thanksgiving Day. Well, as I said, COVID-19, fresh information we have. Primero que todo, pues por el mundo, ha sobrepasado los 60 millones de casos. 60.091.000 casos. Muertes alrededor del mundo, 1.415.622 muertes. Estados Unidos. Los casos en Estados Unidos han pasado de los 12 millones y medio. Muertes ha pasado de las 260.000 muertes, casi 261.000. Y especialmente en los países de América Latina. Hay tres países, sobre todo entre los 10 primeros está Argentina y Colombia. Luego México sigue a Colombia. Argentina ha tenido 1.381.000 casos y 37.432 personas han muerto. Colombia, 1.262.000 personas infectadas, 35.677 han muerto. En México, con más casos que muchos de los otros países de América Central, por supuesto, porque es una población más grande. México, 1.060.000 y 104.000 muertes. 1.060.000 contagios y 104.637 personas han muerto. Es entre los top 10, los 10 principales, Estados Unidos, India, Brasil, Rusia, Francia, España, Reino Unido, Italia, y luego siguen Argentina, Colombia y México. Es una tragedia que ha destruido la economía del mundo, ciertamente ha destruido la economía de Estados Unidos, ha afectado seriamente nuestra economía. Si hubiéramos comenzado desde que llegó la primera información sobre COVID, tal vez hubiéramos tenido más éxito. Pero ahí está, ¿no? Tenemos que usar ese tiempo verbal, el tiempo de la esperanza, si hubiéramos hecho esto o lo otro. Pero aquí estamos, en la realidad muy cruenta. So, COVID-19 across the world, 60 million cases, 1.4 people have died, 1.4 million. United States cases, 12,543,000, with 260,807 people dying from COVID. And recently, the US infections set another daily record, 187,833. Think about that. We had a record number of infections, and we have a record number of people dying in this country as a result of COVID, 260,000 plus. Contrast that with the attitude of the president, who, in a very brief and very bizarre, very odd press briefing, which is nothing he's done, nothing he's liked to do recently, especially after he lost the election. He has not been seen that much in public, I think twice maybe. But he was there on the podium, but did not address COVID, did not address the transition, has not admitted defeat, has not recognized that he was the loser of the election, and has made the transition, as we know, very difficult for the new government. But finally, the GSA, the Government Services Administration, has approved the funds that are necessary for Joe Biden to execute the transition. So that means that now he has access to resources of the federal government, including access to all federal departments and agencies, cybersecurity assistance. Imagine that at this point, most of the communications of Biden and his people probably haven't had top security, cybersecurity, and they have probably been exposed to hackers. Nobody can prove that, but let's hope that they took precautions. But now they have cybersecurity assistance officially. Also, the nominees, the potential nominees, prospective nominees for any of the cabinet positions and other jobs in the administration, like chief of staff and so on at the White House, Now they will undergo an FBI background check. The ability also to see classified information and more intelligence sharing. So officially, Mr. Biden now can be informed of what is happening with the US government, something that Mr. Trump had made impossible up to this point. La Agencia de Servicios Gubernamentales ha aprobado fondos para que el presidente electo, Joe Biden, pueda ejecutar su transición. Creo que leí que eran como 10 millones de dólares que están dedicados a la tarea de la transición, pero que no se había aprobado ese dinero. Pero eso quiere decir que ahora ellos tienen acceso a diferentes agencias del gobierno federal, también acceso a todos los departamentos y acceso al seguro para las comunicaciones, que llaman cyber security. Los informes que lleva a cabo, las investigaciones que lleva a cabo el FBI con la gente que potencialmente son nominados para los puestos del gobierno, también es posible ahora. Y el gobierno de Biden tiene ahora acceso a información clasificada, información secreta. Y también, por supuesto, a compartir estos informes de las agencias de inteligencia, que, como sabemos, en algún momento era un número 17 agencias diferentes. Consideremos la dificultad del nuevo gobierno para organizarse en vista de todos los obstáculos que la administración de Trump les puso enfrente. Pero hay una lección que se aprendió en la transición del gobierno de George W. Bush. Recordemos que hubo una controversia con el voto en la Florida y esa transición se demoró un mes. Y los expertos consideran que esto puede haber afectado la administración de Bush en el modo y la rapidez como se respondió al ataque del septiembre 11. So, well, as we said, the GSA has approved the funds. Now, all this intelligence will be available for the Biden government. And we mentioned the fact that the administration of George Bush was hobbled by the way it was able to respond to 9/11. They were caught unprepared because the transition was delayed due to the Florida vote, and it was delayed by a month. And so many experts consider that that made the response to 9/11 more difficult or slower for the Bush administration. So, as I said, the numbers for COVID are depressing. We start thinking about what's happening with COVID. Global numbers and US numbers creating all kinds of records, setting records for the number of people infected and setting records for the number of people dying as a result of COVID-19. But instead of concentrating on the COVID numbers, there was a montage on MSNBC. I'm not sure if it was original to them or if they just aired it. But about the strange parallel of while Donald Trump is on one side of the screen, bragging about the state of the economy and how Wall Street has created terrific numbers and all kinds of records by the Dow Industrial Average that passed the 30,000 point. He's concentrating on that number as something we have never seen before, because that's his usual style of language, something we have never seen before, those numbers. And that's true. There's a record, 30,000. And the market has picked up, which actually contradicts something that Mr. Trump said a long time ago, that if Biden won the election, that the market would collapse. And yet, here we are with a record. And instead of lamenting the number of people that have died as a result of COVID, this president shows up at a press briefing to brag about the market numbers. So we know that's the only thing that interests him throughout the campaign. There was also a recap of the campaign, a sort of quick look at how Mr. Trump basically wasted an advantage that he had. And even though COVID did a lot of damage to the economy, which is one of the main points of the Trump government, that we had a great economy, he could have won the election if he had responded properly to the threat of COVID-19. But as we know, Donald Trump concentrated on the market, ignored COVID, downplayed its seriousness, the effects of COVID-19 in his own voice. We heard him say to Bob Woodward, a famous reporter from the Watergate Times and author of a most recent book on Trump, Rage, about how the Trump administration is focusing on the divisions in this country, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, we have in Trump's own voice a statement to Woodward saying that he wants to downplay the numbers. He doesn't want to tell us the truth because he's afraid of panic. And that was in February. The experts, Dr. Fauci, Dr. Birx, Gupta, many other doctors that we have been listening to, will tell us that if, instead of hiding the truth from the American people, if Mr. Trump had undertaken the serious task of dealing with COVID-19, we would have been ahead of the game. Instead, we went through that initial first wave of illnesses of COVID-19 that devastated the economy, that forced many cities to close, that forced everybody to be aware of the need to wear masks, not to gather in large groups, to wash our hands. Except for the fact that Mr. Trump, during that time, ignored all the recommendations to stay safe, to keep a distance. He only used that occasion to rally his troops to call for these large rallies, which are called super spreaders, because as a result of many of those rallies, people got infected and many people died. So we'll come back with more of these headlines and commentary. We're going to take a brief pause here en Usa la Media, la Mesa Redonda. Les habla Fernando Mendez, Raquel Acosta controlando el tablero. Regresamos en un momento.
Sí, tenía miedo. No sabía si iba a poder hacerlo.
Encuentra clases gratis para adultos cerca de ti en completatudiploma.org.
Being prepared is a part of who you are, but it's especially important in the case of a disaster. Be informed about possible emergencies in your area. Make a plan that covers where you'll go in an emergency. Build a kit with the things you
If
need to
love them enough
survive.
to suck the snot
There's
out of
no
their
one more
nose at
capable
4
of
a.m.,
planning for
then
your
surely
situation
you'll check
than you.
nhtsa.gov
Start your
/ the
plan
right seat
today.
to make
Go
sure
to
they're in the right car seat.
ready.gov/myplan.
Señores oyentes de Usa la Media, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda, en la víspera del Día de Acción de Gracias. Les habla Fernando Mendez, Raquel Acosta controlando el tablero. Happy Thanksgiving Day. We're on the eve, la víspera del Día de Acción de Gracias, the eve of Thanksgiving Day. And even though, our spiritual guides, priests, rabbis, pastors will tell us that we should be grateful just to be alive, the gift of life to all of us, and especially in these days of COVID, let's be grateful for our health. And we sympathize with those of you who have lost friends and family. At this point, we have 260,000 people who have died in the United States. And it's not just the numbers, it's how it happened and how isolated most of those people died, with nobody next to them because of the fear of contagion. So, muchos de estas gentes que murieron, 260,000 más, 260,000, muchos murieron aislados, solos, porque por miedo al contagio de COVID no se permitía el contacto. Entonces muchas gentes simplemente dieron su último suspiro sin compañía. Así que sentimos mucho por aquellos entre ustedes que han perdido familiares o amigos. En todo caso, pues hay que agradecer que estamos vivos, que tenemos salud, tenemos nuestra salud y que a pesar de todos los tropiezos del 2020, que aquí vamos y aquí continuamos esperanzados en que un nuevo gobierno nos traiga paz y nos traiga estabilidad. So for those of us who are still healthy and alive and well here, we are grateful for our health, and we are hopeful right now that with this new government, we have we recover and we have a better future. So at least now we can hope a little bit. We had a very difficult period here. Let's remember that many of us on that Tuesday, November 3rd, that night of the election, millions of us were concerned that the Trump government was going to continue with all the ills of that administration, all the enemies it created around the world, all the contracts, the compacts, the agreements that it abandoned. And most noticeably, at least for me, the way Trump dealt with our European allies. We have always been very close to Europe. We saved Europe 2 world wars in which we got involved. And after the first one, we created a period of peace. Didn't last because it was not done the right way. But after World War II, we certainly, after the victory of the Allied troops, we had a better period. And in this country, we had a successful presidency Harry Truman is considered one of the great presidents, and more in retrospect. There's a new book by George Scarborough about the Truman years that we should all read. But the transition from Roosevelt to Truman, as we know, Roosevelt died, and Truman was faced with the enormous task of putting an end to the war, putting an end to the Nazi threat. And he and General George Marshall and other generals were triumphant against the Nazi regime. That began a period of prosperity with the election of Eisenhower here and democratic leaders across the European continent. And they revived the economies of this country. They created agreements, economic agreements that ruled to this day, many of which were put in jeopardy precisely by the Trump administration, the way he trampled on agreements. But here we are. We would prefer to concentrate on what is coming, what is going to happen, the near future, and whatever follows the beginning of the Biden administration. There is hope right now. There's more seriousness at the top. We have seen some of the appointments that Mr. Trump has named already, and encouraging to see some of the people that might form part of his cabinet. But we cannot help but sort of reflect still on what we just finished 4 years in which we lost our bearings as a nation, in which people that had always been welcomed by the Statue of Liberty were not welcome anymore, in which our freedoms, everyday freedoms, felt threatened, and the fact that it's undeniable right now that Mr. Trump exploited the divisions in this country, making them deeper, isolating this country externally from other nations, but also creating the impression that this country is divided almost by half and half. Half other people support him and the other half do not like Mr. Trump. And that was probably one of the problems with this election, that it was not a clear mandate. Mr. Biden did win by 6 million votes. So people think that is a mandate. But anyway, so now we have a transition to a Biden era, a Biden government. And he was asked, Mr. Biden was asked, President Biden was asked whether or not this is a third term for the Obama-Biden administration, and he was quick to respond, no. This is his own administration. It's not a continuation of the Obama-Biden years, even though he is proud of having served under Barack Obama, and Barack Obama has lavished praises on Joe Biden and the certainty that he can bring stability to the nation. And in a statement to the media, President-elect Joe Biden says that the White House so far has been sincere in helping his transition to power. And that is new. That just happened yesterday. And we have gone through more than 2 weeks, 3 weeks since November 3rd, not knowing if there was going to be a transition like is happening now, where all the government offices, all the agencies, all the departments will have to stage a transition. But now the Biden people can talk to the Trump people at every level of government to facilitate the transition. But Biden said it has not been begrudging so far, and I don't expect it to be. He said that to an interview in NBC. He spoke as he unveiled his choice of top officials for when he takes over from Donald Trump. Mr. Trump finally agreed to allow the formal transition process to begin on Monday, nearly 3 weeks after the presidential election of November 3rd, which he claims was rigged. President Trump's efforts to challenge the results in key states, one of them is Pennsylvania, have so far failed. On Tuesday, Pennsylvania and Nevada officially certified Mr. Biden's victory a day after the same outcome was announced in Michigan. I think that's how Mr. Trump got the message finally that the charade was over, that he could not just continue denying Mr. Biden access to the transition teams from his government to Biden. So what was Biden's message? Speaking on NBC's Nightly News, he confirmed he had not yet spoken to the president, but added that he did not expect the beginning of his term to be affected by the delay in beginning the transition. Let's hope not. As we mentioned before, the delay of a month did affect the transition to George Bush. Biden said it's a slow start, but it's beginning, and there's 2 months left to go. So I'm feeling good about the ability to be able to get up to speed, said Biden. There were, he said, plans for him to meet the COVID-19 task force in the White House about vaccine distribution and access. Wow. Well, we would like to see who's present. What people from the Trump administration will be present at this COVID-19 task force if Mr. Biden would meet only with the doctors and a couple of officials from the Trump administration, because, as we know, the Vice President, Mike Pence, and Jared Kushner supposedly played a big role in dealing with COVID. They were part of the task force. That reminds me of a fairly insulting episode during that period. When hospitals needed masks, needed equipment, breathing machines, respirators, and I don't know if it was to what equipment Mr. Kushner referred to, but he said they don't own it, we own it, meaning his government, the administration of Donald Trump owned it, as though this equipment, millions of dollars worth, was only to be controlled by the Trump administration, not distributed to hospitals. And as we know, many hospitals went without help. Many hospitals did not get all the equipment they needed. And right now, as predicted by Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx, there's the second wave of COVID, which has forced many cities to close again, to set new regulations, to close restaurants, gyms, bars. There's no indoor dining in Pennsylvania and in other states. New Jersey, I think, is one of them. so that the restrictions, again, because of COVID, are in place. And from New York to uh, New Mexico to California, as we know, some of the border states like Texas, El Paso is one of those places where the crisis is so serious that has filled hospitals and made it impossible for the local services to deal with COVID. And they have been forced to send people to Houston and Dallas and other places. So here we are dealing with COVID, dealing with the new administration, dealing with the headlines about what is happening. And now uh, let's hope that the transition now moves on and Mr. Biden can take the reins of government. So far, he has not had any conversation with Trump. And I would dare predict that no conversation with Trump will be of any help to Mr. Biden. Mr. Biden is already very well informed about the way government operates. We doubt very much that Donald Trump has any information about COVID that is relevant or that he's willing to share. We know that he doesn't know anything about foreign policy. So he can only quote numbers about the Wall Street market. That's all he knows. But anyway, there is great encouragement because some of the names that have appeared for Attorney General, which is one of those offices we hope to examine more closely, it would be wonderful news to get rid of one of the most corrupt public servants ever to reach the heights of government. Probably have to go back to the Nixon administration. The Attorney General, William Barr, he discredited himself. He was instrumental in misinterpreting the report that should have put away this president. The Mueller report, he decided that there was no reason, there was nothing in that report that indicated the president committed a crime. And I beg to differ. I think that's where the report ended. Mr. Mueller set the agenda for the Senate to take steps and get rid of this president. But as we know, Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, the Republicans in the Senate protected Mr. Trump. So now all the eyes of the nation are on Georgia. What's going to happen in Georgia, where there is a runoff election and the two Democratic candidates are serious contenders. If they win, if the Democratic challengers win in Georgia, there will be an equal number of senators, 50-50, and the tie will be broken by the vote of the Vice President, Kamala Harris, will be the one to break the tie. So here we go. It will be a very interesting period if the two Democratic candidates win in Georgia. Otherwise, it might be a little bit of bad news for the Biden administration to have Moscow Mitch McConnell, still in charge of the Senate. So, and right now the Republicans are feeling more confident because they won more seats in Congress. So, we're going to take a break here in Usa la Media. La Mesa Redonda, les habla Fernando Mendez, Raquel Acosta controlando el tablero. Vamos a tomar una breve pausa. Regresamos en un minuto.
Don't wait. Communicate. Make your emergency plan today.
Señores oyentes de Usa la Media, estamos aquí de nuevo en la mesa redonda de Round Table desde el corazón de la ciudad del amor fraternal. Les habla Fernando Mendez, Raquel Acosta controlando el tablero. Bueno, vamos a hacer una transición aquí de noticias del mundo a noticias locales, ciudad y estado. El presidente Donald Trump tiene planes de viajar a Pensilvania hoy en día, la víspera del Día de Acción de Gracias, examinando acusaciones de algo malo que ocurrió con la elección, según él, de acuerdo con ciertos informes que aparecieron en el Tribune News Service. El presidente se va a reunir con estos legisladores para examinar acusaciones de algo irregular que ocurrió en el día de las elecciones. Esto no va para ninguna parte. Es un hecho que ahora Biden es el presidente y se acabó. Se acabó. Por favor. Pero ya sabemos que Trump no puede admitir que él perdió. Despite weeks of extreme rhetoric and failed lawsuits from President Donald Trump, Pennsylvania's top election official certified the state's presidential election results on Tuesday, officially declaring Joe Biden the winner and paving the way for him to receive the state's 20 electoral college votes next month. Pennsylvania Secretary of State Kathy Boockvar made the final count official 3 weeks after the November 3rd election. Biden received 3,458,229 votes, 80,555 more. Pay attention to that number, 80,555 more than President Donald Trump's 3,377,674 votes. Biden won 50.01% of the vote to 48.8% for Trump, according to a report from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Philadelphia City Council has hit the brakes on a rush to equip all police officers with tasers following the fatal police-involved killing of Walter Wallace Jr. earlier this year. City legislators have yet to schedule a necessary committee hearing for a $13.8 million proposal from the Kenya administration to buy 4,500 tasers and related equipment from the Arizona-based Axon Enterprise before the end of the year. As a result, the bill cannot pass before the end of 2020. Well, I would say that's probably a sound decision. They should consider that expense. Again, is it necessary? Will it help the police in any sense? Because there are opinions to the contrary. The Pennsylvania Department of Health, in step with guidance from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, will begin prioritizing COVID-19 contact tracing. Very important thing in this case with COVID-19. The contact tracing has been important as case investigation efforts and cases surge and fewer people cooperate with tracers and investigators. Pennsylvania's positivity rate rose to 11% this week, with more than 34,700 new cases reported over the past 7 days, according to Michael Huff, the state's director of testing and contact tracing efforts. The surging cases and test positivity percentage led the CDC to recommend triaging both cases, investigators and contact tracing efforts. So here we are, still dealing with the after effects of not having taken steps from the very beginning of COVID. Attorneys for Pennsylvania's election and state government officials filed their response to a lawsuit by Representative Mike Kelly, a Republican of Butler, and a Republican congressional candidate, Sean Parnell, calling their request to throw out the results of Pennsylvania general election simply breathtaking. An absurd petition. I don't know. These people, I don't know what they really drank the Kool-Aid, and they cannot give up the idea that they lost. The cult of Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman has now grown to encompass a national following. It has a myriad of implications for his political future. That's for Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman. PennDOT is now just days away from potentially pulling the plug on nearly 400 road and bridge projects across the state on December 1st, after trying unsuccessfully to get legislative approval to borrow $600 million to help pay for those improvements. That's from Penn Live. I must say, we know, because I saw numbers a long time ago, actually, already in the first or second year of the Trump administration, that there were 700 bridges and other facilities in Pennsylvania that needed repair. So there are 400 roads and bridges that these projects that were urgent. They're not the only ones. 400 sort of urgent fixes, and they need 600 million. So Pennsylvania Department of Transportation is about to pull the plug on that. So I don't know what's going to happen. Stay tuned. Former Chester County Sheriff Carolyn Bunny Welsh was charged with theft early Tuesday for allegedly allowing employees to improperly collect comp time for volunteering at fundraisers to the office as K-9 unit. Her living boyfriend, and former subordinate Harry McKinney faces similar charges. Okay, see here, public officials who take advantage of their positions to enrich themselves and their relatives. That's called nepotism. And so we're not shocked, we're not surprised anymore to read any of this. Nepotism was such a big part of the Trump administration. Hopefully, we'll not see that again, or hope not to see it to the extent that it happened here, where so the Trump era, the Trump government became a family enterprise, just looking for profits. And that's what people are saying right now. That's where the president will probably put all his efforts in, continue to enrich himself. One really shocking and not surprising aspect of this: Trump is entitled to Secret Service protection for life. And as we know, he's not been very responsible with his Secret Service men and women. He put them in danger. Remember the little drive at the hospital, so that he could wave at his supporters. He was at Walter Reed Hospital, and he took a very short ride to wave when he was hospitalized with COVID. Well, that's only one time that we have witnessed that. But many of the agents, over 150 by some reports, contracted COVID as a result of Mr. Trump's rallies around the country. The rallies, as we know, became super spreaders. At one of them, one candidate for president died, not at the rally, but he contracted COVID and died later on. Mr. Kane, who had been a candidate, a Republican candidate, and he contracted COVID at one of those rallies. But there were many other rallies that Mr. Trump organized with the desire to feed red meat to his people, accusing the Democrats, the media, and everybody else he could find of conspiring against him. To this day, he continues to assert that he won the election and that it was stolen from him. He has no recourses, no legal venues at this point. There's nothing he can do. But he will continue to deny that he lost. He will continue to say that this election was stolen from him. So, as we approach the day of giving thanks, we give thanks to ourselves for having elected Joe Biden. We have made it possible for us to return to some semblance of normality, some semblance of things being normal and not waking up every day wondering what new horror was written by tweets during the night. So, to all of you, we want to say thank you for your support here from USA La Media, from all of us to you. Wishing you a very happy and healthy Thanksgiving Day. We hope you remember to stay safe, use a mask, use plenty of hand soap to clean your hands, stay clean, and do not gather in large numbers. That comes directly from the CDC, comes directly from the doctors who know more than we do about this. Do not gather in large numbers. And we know that it's difficult at this time of the year, Thanksgiving time and Christmas time. We want to see our relatives and close friends. We want to shake hands, hug. So it's not possible. So if we are able to practice all these steps recommended by the CDC, we will be healthy. So again, to all of you from us at USA La Media, happy Thanksgiving Day. Se despide Fernando Mendez, Raquel Acosta at the board. Hasta la próxima.